Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to our little devotion series looking at Revelation after the break we had for Easter over the weekend. I hope that you and your family were able to have a good time of worship together over the Easter weekend. And it's good to remember and to reflect maybe that while we were at home, while we weren't able to come together, while we were just in our homes with our families, we were nonetheless united with millions, if not billions, of people around the world who were also this weekend remembering the fact that Jesus died for us, was buried, and rose again for us according to the scriptures. It's the greatest event of human history, the most significant and the most wonderful, and we got to remember that this weekend. Today, we start to reflect on the future, don't we? And with most of the schools trying to go back in some way this coming week, I think it's going to be a different week for most of us. And as we come to the end of the first 3 weeks of the lockdown, it's going to get harder and it's going to get more difficult. And our prayers are with you, and I know yours with us as well. And so please keep praying for everybody at Hilton Baptist as we come through this together. Today, our passage is Revelation 8, verses 1 to 5, and it is the opening of the seventh seal. Do you remember in Revelation 5, we looked at the scroll, which was in the right hand of the one who sat on the throne, and it had 7 seals. And John wept because those seals, which revealed the history of the world, what was going to happen going forward, how God was going to restore and renew everything from the mess that the world is in. And John wept because there was no one to open the seals and to show what was going to happen. But then we were introduced to the lion, who looked like a lamb that had been slain. And he was worthy and able to open the seals. And in Revelation chapter 6, he started opening the seals. The first 4 seals were pretty scary. The 5th seal was for all the martyrs around the altar of God. And the 6th seal, if you have a look right at the end of Revelation 6, is effectively the end of the world as we know it, when things don't operate as we've come to know them to operate. The sun, the stars, the moon, everything seems to be collapsing in on itself, and it seems that the end is near. And then Revelation 7 is a beautiful description of God's people around the throne, a specific number, but yet a number no one can count, together around the throne of God. And that those of us who are sealed with his seal, the seal of the Holy Spirit, get to experience. And so that's the background. Revelation 8 is the 7th seal. There's been a gap, there's been a pause, and what will happen when the 7th seal is opened? What will the 7th seal be? What will be revealed? How is it all going to end up? And I suppose it's a little bit of an anticlimax when the 7th seal is silence. It gets opened and there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. So what does that mean? What's that all about? There are lots of people who've given different answers. Some people say it's a reference back to what history was like before creation, the silence that existed there. There are others who say that it's just a pause before judgment happens and the new heaven and the new earth are established. But I think that there's a better explanation. And I think it's a really significant explanation worth taking note of. A little bit later, in verses 3 and 4, we're told of a second angel. We'll come to the first angel tomorrow. A second angel who is given the authority to take incense out of, or to offer incense along with the prayers of God's people. And he puts them on a golden altar in front of the throne. And I think it's quite significant here. I think it's worth noting that the noise in heaven has been the great worship of God that has been worthy to happen all the time. But there's a pause. There's quiet. And the reason that there is quiet is that the prayers of God's people, both in heaven and on earth, both now and in the past and in the future to come, are carefully presented before God before everything ends as we know it. I don't know about you, but I often feel so weak and useless and unable to influence anything that happens in the world today. How am I going to change the world? How am I going to bring about God's kingdom? How am I going to be part of what God is doing in this world? I'm too small, I'm too insignificant, I'm too weak. But the one thing that I can do is pray. And I can pray for God to do it. I can pray for God to bring about his kingdom. I can pray for God to overcome evil. I can pray for God to establish everything that he has planned and purposed for this world. And what this little passage tells us is that there is a moment in the history of the world where all those prayers that I offer, that you offer, that every other believer has offered and ever will offer, that are brought before the throne. And they have some kind of influence, some kind of role to play in the establishment of God's kingdom and the overcoming of evil. And so can I urge you with everything that I have to not give up the habit of prayer and to keep praying, and particularly to pray, Father in heaven, your kingdom come, your will be done. And may we one day discover together that as we prayed those prayers, and specifically and about all sorts of things associated with that, that actually one day they actually had a role to play and they were part of God's great work in the world to bring about his kingdom. God bless you as you pray. Keep praying and don't stop. Amen.